Hi there, it's Trevor again from Software Training for Students. In the last video, we talked about the query by example grid and created a few queries with it. However, there's one big problem with this. Access is the only program that uses the query by example grid, and if that's all you know about queries, you will be absolutely lost when you try to create queries outside of Access. For this reason, it is very important to learn how queries work with SQL so that your skills can reach a little bit further. This video will start from the very beginning of SQL and show you how to use each keyword. We'll be working with the same database as last time, Yelp Dataset Challenge Small, which is in your Yelp example folder. Let's create a new query. Go to Create, Query Design, and let's skip right on over. Close the Show Table box. We don't need it. We're going to SQL View. Click on View and choose SQL View. The first two keywords I'll teach you about are the select and from keywords. Let's type the following. Select business dot business name from business. And let's click Run. There they all are. Let's look at that in a little bit more detail, though. The two keywords here are select and from. Keywords in SQL are usually capitalized. Due to readability and convention, I highly recommend that you use all caps when you're working with SQL keywords. The capitalization in your table and field names are very important, and you won't be able to mess those up. Also remember that spaces cannot be used in table or field names. The other thing you should notice is the semicolon at the end of a line. This semicolon sort of tells the computer, all right, this is what I want you to do, go do it. Sort of like a period at the end of a sentence. Access will work if you don't have the semicolon, but other programs will not, so make sure it's in there. Sometimes you may see SQL code that looks something like this. This works the exact same. SQL is one of the very many languages that don't care about whitespace. So this will all still work. Even if I have a bunch of spaces and returns in the middle of my lines, I've still got my working query. Make sure, though, that you don't put any spaces inside of things. So here's a space in between fur and and it's not going to work. Most of the time when people use this rule, it's because a line is getting a little bit too long. This right here is probably as long as you want a line to be. You can get longer if you want, but it will detract from the readability of your code. So we've just performed our first function in SQL, the select function. This function returns all values in a specified group. In this case, we have returned all of the business name values from the business table. Note that this code is a little bit redundant. We have business here and business here. They're both telling our SQL interpreter that we're looking at the business table. So if you don't want to use this first one, you don't need to. You can just say select the field name from the table. It will work the same way. However, I always recommend completeness. And having that extra table name on there will make sure that nothing goes wrong in your SQL code. Also, later on, it's going to be a lot more important than it is right now. So get in the habit of using the table name, a period, and the field name all the time. Instead of this field name, we may use this, a wildcard or asterisk. This asterisk means all the fields. So select all the fields from the business table will give us the whole business table. So let's look at the business names in our business table. And let's move to the next line and type where, and then give a criteria. Make sure that you do not have a semicolon in the middle of your code. This first one should be gone. Semicolon is always the last part of a query. But let's run this up. We'll find every single business that has a higher than 4 rating on Yelp. There they all are. Looks pretty good. If we want to see the stars as well, let's go back to select and make it a compound selection. So I want business name from the business table and stars from the business table. This will give us 2 columns in our query result. Let's select 2 values. Business name from the business table and category name from the categories table. We'll select them from the business table. Now they're not all on the business table, so we need to join the 2 tables. We'll use a keyword called inner join. This inner join isn't complete unless we have a relationship to relate the 2 tables. So this is kind of like when we were working with relationships. We needed to tell Access exactly the 2 fields that were related, that would join the tables together. So that will be done with the keyword on. And then we'll tell Access what our primary key and foreign key are. These are business ID from the business table and business ID from the categories table. Here is where it starts to get very, very important that you have your table name and your field name. Let's run this query to see what it does. Looks pretty good. You've got every business and the multiple categories associated with it. So I'm using inner join today. And this database is worked out so that if I used any other type of join, it would work just as well. This very last line is what decides where the right and where the left is of my current join. Here, business is my left table, and categories is my right table. Let's look at a different example for a second. Here I've got data for 5 students and their favorite classes. Notice that nobody's favorite class is marketing or statics, and Frank doesn't have a favorite class. This is going to reflect on what type of joins reflect each record. An inner join will ignore all pairs that have a null value. You'll notice that marketing and statics don't show up in the favorite class list, and Frank doesn't show up in the student list. So here's our left outer join table, and we can see that every value in the left table has been preserved. However, if a record exists in the right table without a matching record in the left table, then it will be omitted. Notice the marketing and statics favorite classes are omitted from the left outer join list. On the other hand, with a right outer join, we have exactly the opposite. Every record from the right table, in this case favorite class, is preserved, and only the records in the left table that have a favorite class, so not Frank, are reflected in our table. Lastly, there's a full outer join, which gives us just, every value. There are actually more kinds of joins, such as a cross join, a join operation that produces the Cartesian product of 2 tables, but we don't need to get into that just yet. So the order by keyword is used to sort the results of a query. We've seen this in action before, but we'll go through it again in SQL View. Let's delete everything we have so far and restart. Let's select the business name and stars from the business table. And we'll order them by the number of stars. So on the next line, I'll use the keyword order by, and then the value stars. We can run this query. It looks all right, but I would really rather see the highest rated restaurants first instead of the lowest rated restaurants. So we can do this with an extra keyword. Go back to View, SQL View, and we'll give our order by command the keyword descending, spelled D-E-S-C. The default value is ascending, spelled A-S-C, but we're going for descending, so we'll use that first one, and then click on Run. And there we are. And it is nice, but it's not exactly perfect. I would really rather have the business name sorted alphabetically, as to make it a little bit more of an objective list. I don't want Lake Vista Cafe to be above the other values for, no reason. So I'll organize them alphabetically. Go back to View, SQL View, and add a comma to your order by keyword to sort by a second level. The ASC in here isn't exactly necessary because ascending is the default value for order by, but as I said before, it's always best to be as complete as possible in SQL. So click on Run once more, and we can see that our business names have been alphabetized, but only after they've been ordered by the number of stars. If you had a little bit of trouble understanding that totals box before, have no fear. I think it's a little bit easier to understand when you're actually coding it in SQL. In SQL, the totals are actually called aggregate functions. I'm going to go through 3 of them today: count, sum, and average, and group by. Let's look at count first. So here's a simple query. Select everything from the reviews table. This looks good. It's just going to give us the reviews table. However, maybe I just want a count of all the reviews in the reviews table. So instead of just everything, let's select count of everything. All of these aggregate functions will be sort of substituted for table names, and they'll use the table attributes as arguments for the aggregate keyword. So here, the word count is standing in for the asterisk, and basically putting a limitation on it. When we click on Run, we'll see that it just has one value, the number of records in our reviews table. Here we have 11,000 records. Let's go back to our SQL view. Here I'm going to select the count of specifically the number of stars records. So here we have stars from the reviews table. Now we're going to add a criteria, just to make it a little bit more interesting. This will give us the number of 5-star reviews in our database. Let's click on Run. And we see that we have 3,426. One thing that I'd like to change about this is this weird little EXPR1000. This stands for expression. It's basically a default name for an aggregated table. You can go back to SQL view and change that aggregated name by giving it an as keyword. This is something we haven't done before. So I'm going to select the count of star records and label that as 5-star reviews. Make sure that this comes before the from keyword. It needs to be right after the value being selected. So let's click on Run now and see that our value has been given a name. A little bit more descriptive and a lot more easy to read. All right, let's look at the sum function now. So the sum function will aggregate the numerical value of values in a column. Let's enter the following. Select the sum of the review count field. This is a field that contains the number of reviews for each business. Make sure to have your from keyword on there, and your semicolon, and click on Run. Very similarly, we have the average aggregate function. Let's type select average, AVG, of the stars column in the business table. We'll give an alias to this value as average stars, and then give it the from keyword. Don't forget your semicolon, and then click on Run. There we go. Let's find the average number of stars for all restaurants with more than 30 reviews. So we can add a where keyword and show all of the businesses whose review count is greater than 30. When we run it, we can see that the average stars is a little bit higher, suggesting that businesses that are reviewed often get higher ratings than businesses that are reviewed not very often. Lastly, let's look at group by. Now, group by isn't an aggregate function per se, but it has a somewhat similar application. Let's write a query that finds out how many restaurants in our database falls under each restaurant category. This will serve as sort of a review for this video. First thing we'll want to do is select our field names. Select category name from the categories table. And the count of business names from the business table. This count of business names in the business table will be aliased as number of restaurants. And we'll get it from the business table. This is where you want to be breaking down your lines. So I'm going to break my line here and here. Since we are working with two different tables, we're going to need to join them together. This one's going to be a left outer join. Remember that this left outer join will show all of the records for the left table, in this case the business table. So this query looks pretty good, but it needs one more thing, a group by. Since I don't want to see every single record for every single category, I just want to see one record for each category, I'm going to need to group my information by the category name. So the last line of my query will be group by categories, category name. Let's click on Run. And here, the category names are all given a number of restaurants that pertain to them. You can see the effect of group by in the fact that every single category has a new line, and no category is represented by the same word more than once. If we didn't group by category name, then we can imagine that we would just have two values for Afghan, both with the number 1, and then 30 values for American, all 30 with the value 1. Now, this isn't necessarily what would happen. What would happen is Access would just give us an error and tell us to relook at our code again. Congratulations, you're an SQL wizard. You've learned about all the basic keywords in SQL and a few of the aggregate functions. If you'd like to learn more about coding with SQL, more information can be found here. Go to w3schools.com. You can find a free resource on SQL if you scroll down just a little bit and click on Learn SQL. I highly recommend this resource. It's completely free. And if not, you can always go to wisc.edu/STS, sign up for an Ask a Trainer appointment, or send us an email if you have any questions at all. Thanks for watching, and go Badgers!